There are 10,000 ways for gods to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way for them to arrive unannounced, screaming through reality itself like a comet wrapped in lightning and fire. Today's story begins with exactly that. A star falling where no star should be, and an empire that mistakes a stranger for salvation. The Sol system had seen horrors beyond counting. Demon incursions, Xenos raids, traitor fleets clawing at Holy Terra's doorstep. But nothing had prepared the censor priests of Luna's orbital stations for the dimensional rupture that tore open 3 million kilometers above the moon's surface. It wasn't a warp rift. The tech adepts monitoring the event swore by the Omnissiah that the energy signature matched no known phenomenon in Imperial records. Reality simply folded, like parchment crumpling in an invisible fist, and something impossible stepped through. Lance Sergeant Corvus of the Lucifer Blacks watched through his magnoculars as the burning figure descended. 40 years he'd served on Luna's defense stations. 40 years of watching the void for enemies of mankind. His hands, steady through 1,000 alerts, trembled now. "Command, this is Observation Post 88. Confirm visual on descending object. It's Emperor preserve us. It's humanoid." The Vox crackled with a dozen overlapping voices. Fleet Admiral Koskinen's cut through them all. "All batteries hold fire. Repeat, hold fire. Astropathic choir reports massive psychic resonance. This could be..." A pause, heavy with implications. "Contact the Adeptus Custodes." Immediately, the figure fell like divine judgment given form. Atmospheric friction that should have vaporized any living thing washed over him harmlessly. He blazed brighter than a defense laser, trailing plasma and impossible blue light. When he struck the lunar surface in the Sea of Tranquility, the impact crater stretched 200 meters across and glowed white-hot. Corvus's Auspex died. So did every electronic system within a kilometer. Emergency klaxons wailed across Luna's installations as tech priests scrambled to restart machine spirits that had simply stopped, as if shocked into silence by what they'd witnessed. In the crater's center, a man stood. Not a man, something more. He rose from molten regolith, costume torn but body unmarked, blue eyes scanning the horizon with perfect clarity. The red cape that hung from his shoulders shouldn't have survived atmospheric entry. The symbol on his chest, an angular S that could have been High Gothic calligraphy or Xenos script, caught Luna's pale sunlight and seemed to glow. Superman had no idea where he was. The last thing he remembered was Darkseid's Omega beams intersecting with a collapsing boom tube, reality folding in on itself, and then this, a gray wasteland under black sky. Massive installations covering the horizon, and above, a blue-green world that almost looked like Earth but felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. The air tasted of incense and oil. The stone beneath his feet thrummed with ancient machinery, and everywhere, he felt the weight of suffering pressing down like a physical force. "Where am I?" he whispered, super hearing already picking up the mechanical sounds of approaching vehicles. Lots of them. The response came faster than even he anticipated. Valkyrie assault carriers screamed across the lunar surface. Sentinel walkers stomped into defensive positions. Lascanon batteries swiveled to track him. And cutting through the center of it all, golden giants that made Superman's instincts scream danger. The Adeptus Custodes had arrived. 10 of them, their auramite armor catching light like captured stars. Guardian spears hummed with disruption fields. Each warrior moved with a precision that spoke of 10,000 years of perfect training. Captain General Valoris himself led them, his eagle-helmed visage revealing nothing as he studied the stranger in the crater. Behind the custodes came others, Sisters of Silence, their blank presence making Superman's skin crawl. Tech priests whose mechanical augmentations whirred and clicked as they aimed scanning devices. Inquisitors in power armor. Storm bolters loaded and ready. Imperial Guard by the hundreds. Lace guns raised with parade ground discipline despite the fear Superman could hear in their racing heartbeats. "Identify yourself," Valoris commanded, voice amplified through his armor's vox grills. "By whose authority do you walk upon Luna, gateway to Holy Terra?" Superman raised his hand slowly, universal gesture of peace. "I don't want trouble. My name is Kal-El. I'm not from—" He paused, searching for words. "I'm not from this reality. Something pulled me here. I just want to understand what's happened and find a way home." The tech priests erupted in binary cant. Their auspexes were painting results that made their mechanical eyes flare bright with disbelief. Genitor Secundus Vrel, 300 years old and augmented beyond recognition, stared at his data slate like it had declared the Emperor a lie. "Impossible," Vrel croaked through his Vox unit. "Gene structure shows Throne of Terra. This cannot be correct." He looked up at Valoris, ocular implants whirring as they focused. "Captain General, his genetic pattern. It matches theoretical projections for Primarch-level biology. Perfect cellular structure, no warp taint, enhanced organ systems beyond even Astartes specifications. Sir, this reads as you... "Do not speak it," Valoris warned. But the damage was done. The word raced through Vox channels, whispered by soldiers who'd spent lifetimes praying for such a moment. Primarch. In the command bunker 3 kilometers away, Fleet Admiral Kuskinen made the call that would echo across the galaxy. His hand shook as he keyed the priority astropathic channel reserved for civilization-ending emergencies. "This is Luna Defense Command. Authentication code Throne 7 Crimson. Notify the Lord Commander immediately. Potential Primarch-level entity detected on Luna's surface. Requesting immediate transport to Sanctum Imperialis for verification. Emperor's light guide us all." Superman stood in the crater, surrounded by an army, and felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. He'd faced down Darkseid, fought Doomsday, saved his Earth 1,000 times, but standing here on this dead moon, with soldiers whose thoughts screamed with desperate hope and religious fervor, he felt something he rarely experienced: uncertainty. "I'm not who you think I am," he said quietly, though he had no idea what they thought. Valoris stepped forward, Guardian spear lowered but not sheathed. "Then let the Lord Commander decide what you are. If you resist, we will destroy you. If you comply, you will be brought before Robot Guilliman, son of the Emperor himself. Choose now." Superman looked at the golden giant, then at the blue-green world hanging in the void above, and made his choice. "Take me to your leader." The Thunderhawk gunship that carried Superman toward Terra was a flying cathedral. All Gothic arches and holy inscriptions etched into adamantium plating. He sat in restraints designed for space marines, flanked by custodes who never stopped watching him. Their silence was absolute, professional, but Superman could hear their hearts beating faster than they should for warriors supposedly beyond fear. Captain General Valoris stood at the gunship's fore, mag-locked boots keeping him steady as the craft pierced Terra's atmosphere. Through the viewport, Superman saw his first glimpse of humanity's throne world, and his breath caught. It wasn't the gleaming utopia he'd expected. Terra was a hive of metal and stone, Continent-sized cities stacked upon themselves like geological layers of civilization compressed into architectural madness. The sky glowed amber with industrial haze. Orbital platforms formed rings within rings. Weapons batteries the size of mountains tracking everything that moved. And everywhere, the golden imperial Aquila stared down like the eyes of a jealous god. "This is Terra?" Superman asked, unable to hide his shock. "Holy Terra," Valorous corrected. "Birthplace of mankind. Seat of the Emperor's domain. 10,000 years of history compressed into one world." He turned slightly. "What did you expect? Something more alive?" The custodian's laugh was bitter. "It's the most populated world in the Imperium. Trillions of souls packed into hive spires that pierce the clouds. Most will never see natural sunlight. Most will labor their entire lives in manufactorums producing bolter shells or lasgun power packs. And most will die grateful for the privilege of serving." He paused. "This is what survival looks like when the galaxy wants you extinct." Superman said nothing. His X-ray vision was already penetrating the hive layers, seeing the humanity crammed into spaces that would violate every safety regulation he'd ever known. Families living in corridors, workers sleeping in shifts in the same bunks, children who'd never known grass or trees. The sheer scale of suffering made his chest tight. The Thunderhawk descended toward the Imperial Palace, and Superman's perspective shifted. The palace wasn't a building. It was a mountain range of architecture, sprawling across what had once been the Himalayan mountains. Spires reached into low orbit. Walls that could shrug off lance strikes stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Defense batteries that could glass continents sat dormant but ready. At the center, barely visible even to his enhanced sight, pulsed a golden light that felt simultaneously holy and horrifying. The Golden Throne. He didn't know what it was yet, but something deep in his cells recoiled from it. They landed in a courtyard that could have held all of Metropolis. Custodes in ceremonial armor lined the approach. 200 golden giants standing at attention. Beyond them, Inquisitors in sealed power armor, their personal seals marking them as authorities who answered only to the High Lords themselves. Tech priests whose augmentations had long since replaced more flesh than remained human. And sisters of battle, their armor white as bone, flamers and bolters held with religious devotion. At the far end, before a doorway carved with scenes of ancient conquest, stood a figure that made even the Custodes seem small. Robut Guilliman, Lord Commander of the Imperium, Primarch of the Ultramarines, stood 4 meters tall in his armor of fate. The powered plate was a masterwork of artifice and history. Blue ceramite inscribed with battle honors dating back to the Great Crusade. The Emperor's sword hung at his hip, its power dormant but present. His face, unmarred by helm, was handsome in the way classical statues were handsome. Perfect features arranged with mathematical precision. But his eyes had seen the Imperium he'd built for fall into theocratic nightmare, and they held the weight of that knowledge. Superman stepped forward, restraints released, and met the Primarch's gaze. For 3 seconds, neither spoke. The assembled crowd held their breath. Guilliman broke the silence first. "So, you're what has the entire palace in theological crisis." He descended the steps, each footfall echoing like judgment. "Genitor Vrel's preliminary report claims you possess physiological markers consistent with Primarch biology. Enhanced cellular structure, organ redundancy, physical capabilities beyond even first founding Astartes." He stopped 3 meters away. Yet you claim to be from another reality entirely. Interesting. It's the truth, Superman said simply. I don't know what a Primarch is, but I'm not one of yours. I'm from Earth. A different Earth. I was pulled here by forces I don't fully understand. I mean no harm to anyone here. Harm. Gilliman's laugh was sharp. Do you understand what your mere presence has already done? Across Luna, soldiers are whispering that the 21st Primarch has returned. The lost one. The Primarch whose records were scrubbed from history after. He waved dismissively. Ancient wounds. But they believe. The ecclesiarchy is already preparing ceremonies of worship. The Inquisition is investigating heresy. And he stepped closer. I look at you and see something I haven't seen in 10,000 years. What's that? Uncorrupted potential. Gilliman circled Superman slowly. Professional assessment in every glance. No warp taint, no chaos corruption, no mechanical augmentation, pure genetic enhancement operating at theoretical maximum efficiency. The Emperor spent decades creating me and my brothers in his laboratories beneath these very mountains. You claim to have been born this way? My biology is Kryptonian. My birth planet's sun gave me these abilities. Under your yellow sun, Superman gestured upward. I'm stronger, faster, essentially invulnerable to conventional harm. Demonstrate. It wasn't a request. Superman glanced at the assembled warriors, then up at the palace spire overhead. He bent his knees slightly and pushed. The courtyard stones cracked as he launched skyward, accelerating to supersonic speeds in seconds. He circled the palace spire once, twice, 3 times, then descended in a controlled hover, cape settling around him as his feet touched stone. The silence was absolute. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a guardsman whispered 2 words that would echo across the Imperium. Emperor's Mercy. Gilliman's expression remained neutral, but Superman heard his heartbeat spike. That changes calculations significantly. He turned to his honor guard. Clear the courtyard. Lord Commander's authority. Everyone except the custodes. Out, now. The crowd dispersed with military efficiency, though Superman caught the lingering stares, the hungry hope in their eyes. When only custodes remained, Gilliman's diplomatic mask fell away, replaced by something rawer. We need to talk, the Primarch said quietly, about what you are, what this Imperium has become, and why your arrival might be the most dangerous thing to happen to humanity in 10 millennia. Come, walk with me. There are things you need to understand before they make you a saint or a martyr. They walked through corridors built for gods. Vaulted ceilings stretched 30 meters high, carved with murals depicting humanity's conquest of the stars. Servo skulls floated past, their dead eyes glowing with mechanical purpose. Every 100 meters, custodes stood at attention, silent sentinels who'd witnessed millennia pass while they remained unchanged. Superman's footsteps echoed alongside Gilliman's heavier tread. The Primarch had dismissed even his honor guard, leaving them alone save for the ever-present watchers in golden armor. They passed through a doorway sealed with mechanisms that Superman's X-ray vision couldn't penetrate, into a chamber that felt more human than anything he'd seen so far. The strategium was vast but intimate, dominated by a hololithic display showing the galaxy itself. Tens of thousands of stars glowed in miniature, color-coded by threat level. Superman stepped closer and felt his stomach drop. Red dominated the display. Crimson markers indicating active war zones outnumbered peaceful systems 10 to 1. This is the Imperium of man, Gilliman said, gesturing at the carnage. 1 million worlds, Quadrillions of souls, all held together by faith, fear, and endless war. He manipulated controls, zooming into a sector. Here, the Caradon sector. 16 systems lost to orc invasions in the past decade. 3 billion dead. We count that as acceptable losses. Another gesture. The Nachmund Gauntlet. The only stable corridor through the Great Rift. That purple scar bisecting the galaxy. Without it, half the Imperium dies in darkness, cut off from reinforcement. Superman studied the display. Superhuman mind processing the strategic nightmare before him. How do you fight on so many fronts simultaneously? We don't fight to win. We fight to not lose. Gilliman's voice carried 10,000 years of exhaustion. Every day, we sacrifice 1,000 psychers to keep the Emperor's light burning. Every hour, 10,000 guardsmen die holding lines against enemies you cannot fathom. Every minute, entire worlds make the choice between submission to our Imperium or extermination. He turned to face Superman directly. This is the galaxy you've entered. There is no peace. There is no mercy. There is only war, and the brief moments between battles where we bury our dead and prepare for the next. That's insane, Superman said flatly. You're telling me this has been going on for 10,000 years since my father fell. Longer if you count the age of strife before that. Gilliman deactivated the display. Do you understand now why your appearance causes such chaos? The soldiers on Luna looked at you and saw hope. They saw a Primarch returned, a son of the Emperor walking among them again. Do you grasp what that means to people who've known only grinding darkness? Superman met his gaze. I understand hope. I've spent my entire life giving people hope, showing them that someone will stand between them and the darkness. That's not chaos. That's what keeps civilizations alive. In your reality, perhaps. Gilliman walked to a viewport overlooking the palace grounds. Here, hope is dangerous. Hope makes soldiers question orders. Hope makes workers dream of something better than servitude. Hope, his voice turned bitter, is what the ruinous powers exploit. They whisper promises of salvation, and entire worlds fall to chaos because people dare to hope for something more than suffering. So you'd rather they have nothing? Superman's voice rose. You'd rather they accept this nightmare as normal? I'd rather they survive. Gilliman's fist slammed into the viewport frame, cracking ceramite. You've been here for hours. Let me show you what I've seen for a century since my resurrection. He activated a secondary display. Images flooded the hololithic projector. A hive city burning, millions trapped as flames consumed hab blocks. A plague ship dumping corpses into the void. An inquisitor ordering exterminatus on a world of 6 billion because a genestealer cult had infiltrated 3 hives' spires. Children pressed into labor gangs, mass graves, penal legions driven forward by commissars' bolt pistols. The Imperium's machinery of survival, built on mountains of human suffering. Superman watched it all, jaw clenched, fists trembling. His heat vision flickered involuntarily, scorching the floor at his feet. This is what we do to survive, Gilliman said quietly. This is the Imperium my father built. That I returned to find metastasized into bureaucratic cruelty. I've spent a century trying to reform it, and I've barely made a dent. The machine is too large, too entrenched, too necessary. Remove one piece of horror, and 3 more rush in to fill the gap. Then the machine is broken. Superman turned away from the display, unable to watch anymore. If this is what survival looks like, maybe you're surviving the wrong way. There is no other way. Gilliman's voice hardened. You come from a reality where heroes save the day, where justice prevails and good triumphs. This is not that reality. This is a galaxy where gods are real and they hunger for human souls, where alien empires view us as prey or vermin, where our own species will tear itself apart the moment we show weakness. He stepped closer. You think I haven't tried mercy? I'm Robut Guilliman, the statesman Primarch, the architect of the Imperium Secundus. I built civilizations based on reason and law, and every single one was ground to dust because mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. I don't believe that. Superman's voice dropped to something dangerous. I've faced tyrants who said the same thing. Dictators who claimed cruelty was necessary for order. They were wrong then, and you're wrong now. Silence stretched between them. Two beings of impossible power locked in philosophical combat. Guilliman's expression shifted through calculation, frustration, and something that might have been admiration. You're either the most dangerous idealist I've ever met, the Primarch said slowly, or exactly what this Imperium needs to remember it once dreamed of being better. He extended a massive hand. Walk with me further. See the Imperium as it truly is. Meet those who serve. And then tell me with absolute certainty, that you can save this galaxy with kindness. Superman looked at the offered hand, then at the Primarch's face. He saw genuine challenge there, but also something else. The faintest glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was wrong about Mercy being dead. He clasped Guilliman's hand. Then let me try anyway. The Primarch's grip was iron. So be it. But when you fail, and you will fail, remember that I warned you. This galaxy breaks everyone eventually. Even Primarchs, even gods. He released Superman's hand. Especially heroes. Guilliman kept his promise. Over the next 3 days, he showed Superman the Imperium's beating heart, and it was a horror show wrapped in necessity and sanctified by 10 millennia of tradition. The first stop was a Departamento Munitorum processing center where Imperial Guard regiments were assembled. Superman watched as conscripts, some barely 16 Terran years old, were tattooed with regimental numbers, issued lace guns older than their grandparents, and given 14 days of training before shipping out to war zones, where their life expectancy was measured in hours. A commissar, his black greatcoat pristine despite the grim surroundings, noticed Superman's expression. "First time seeing the guard, my lord?" He assumed Superman was a visiting dignitary, some lord commander from a distant sector. These Arcadia's children, born after the fall. They carry their homeworld's legacy in their blood. They'll die well. "They're children," Superman said, watching a young woman struggling to field strip her laser gun under a sergeant's barked instructions. "They're soldiers," the commissar corrected. "And soldiers die? Better they die holding a line than cowering in some hive block when the orcs come." He gestured to a memorial wall covered in names. 17 million guardsmen from this processing center alone, gone to the Emperor's side in the past century. Every one of them gave humanity another day. That's all we ask. One more day. Superman's fists clenched. He could hear their hearts, these conscripts. Smell their fear beneath the bravado. Sense the resignation of people who'd been taught since birth that their lives were ammunition to be expended. And the worst part? Some of them believed it. Actually took pride in being thrown into the meat grinder. "You disagree with the system?" Guilliman asked as they left. The Primarch reading Superman's body language with practiced ease. "I disagree with treating human beings as expendable resources. Then you disagree with survival. Guilliman led him down another corridor. The Imperium loses 3 million guardsmen daily across the galaxy. Daily. If we valued each life the way you suggest, we'd have collapsed 10,000 years ago. Sentiment is a luxury purchased with security. We have no security, therefore no sentiment. The next stop was worse. A hive factory where workers assembled bolt rounds in 16-hour shifts. Superman's enhanced hearing picked up the prayers they whispered. Not prayers for salvation or relief, but prayers of gratitude for being allowed to serve. Children, their hands stained with promethium residue, thanked the Emperor for letting them contribute to humanity's defense. A supervisor, more machine than man after decades of industrial accidents, explained proudly, "This facility produces 12 million rounds per day. We haven't missed quota in 47 years. The Omnissiah blesses our labor." He gestured to workers whose fingers had been replaced by more efficient mechanical claws. Augmentation increases productivity by 33%. Most volunteer for the procedures. Superman wanted to ask if they understood what they were volunteering for, but he already knew the answer. In this reality, becoming more machine was considered an honor. Giving up humanity piece by piece was progress. That night, in quarters provided within the palace itself, Superman stood at a viewport overlooking Terra's hive spires. The amber glow of industry never dimmed. Somewhere below, billions toiled in darkness so the Imperium's war machine could continue grinding forward. He could hear them if he focused, a chorus of suffering so vast it threatened to overwhelm even his alien senses. A knock at the door, not Guilliman's heavy tread, but something lighter. Superman opened it to find a woman in ornate power armor, the symbol of a book and quill emblazoned on her breastplate. "Forgive the intrusion, my lord." She bowed slightly. "I am Canoness Superior Verena of the Order of our Martyred Lady. The Lord Commander suggested I speak with you." Superman stepped aside, allowing her entry. The Sister of Battle moved with lethal grace, every motion speaking to decades of combat training. She removed her helm, revealing scarred features and eyes that burned with absolute conviction. "You object to our methods," she said simply. "I can see it in your posture, the way you looked at the guard conscripts, the horror in your expression at the manufactorum." She set her helm on a table. "You think we're monsters." "I think you're victims pretending to be soldiers," Superman replied. "I think you've been taught that suffering is holy, that mercy is weakness, and that your lives matter less than the system you serve." Verena smiled, and it was genuine. "You sound like the saints we teach our novices about. Saint Celestine, Saint Macarius, even Saint Sabbat. They believed humanity deserved better." Her smile faded. "Then they met reality. Celestine has died and been resurrected 4 times fighting demons. Macarius conquered 1,000 worlds and died of exhaustion at 42. Sabbat was martyred holding a shrine world against chaos. The Imperium doesn't reward saints with paradise, my lord. It rewards them with opportunities for glorious martyrdom." "That's not inspiration," Superman said. "That's tragedy." "It's both." Verena walked to the viewport. "I fought for 27 years. I've killed heretics, xenos, and traitors. I've watched sisters die in my arm, screaming prayers as their armor melted under hellfire. I've ordered orbital bombardments on cities to prevent demonic incursion, knowing I was killing millions to save billions." She turned to face him. "And every single action was necessary, not right, not good, necessary. That's the Imperium." "We don't have the luxury of your morality." "Everyone has the luxury of choosing compassion," Superman said. "Even here, especially here." "Then demonstrate it. Verena's challenge was direct. Guilliman has granted you a tour of the hive levels tomorrow. 10 billion people crammed into space meant for 1 billion. Gang warfare, disease, starvation in the shadow of the Emperor's palace itself. Go among them, show them your compassion, and tell me, when the gangers try to kill you for your cape, when the desperate mob tears at you for food you don't have, when corrupt officials demand you bow to their authority, tell me how compassion conquers that. Superman met her gaze. I will, and I'll prove that hope is stronger than fear. Verena smiled again, sadder this time. Then the Imperium will eat you alive, my lord. It consumes hope like a starving man consumes bread. Desperately, violently, and always hungry for more. She retrieved her helm. But I pray to the Emperor I'm wrong. We could use a miracle. After she left, Superman returned to the viewport. Below, Terra churned with endless misery. Above, stars glittered in the void, each one potentially hosting horrors beyond imagination. And somewhere in between, he was supposed to find a way to matter. Let me try anyway, he whispered to the darkness. The darkness, as always, offered no answers. The descent into Terra's underhive took 6 hours through transit shafts that plunged kilometers beneath the palace grounds. Superman traveled with a minimal escort. Guilliman had insisted on only 4 custodes, and even those remained at the upper levels. If you want to understand the Imperium, the Primarch had said, see it without our golden masks in the way. The air changed as they descended. The incense-heavy atmosphere of the palace gave way to industrial smog, then to something worse, the accumulated stench of billions living in spaces never meant for human habitation. Superman's enhanced senses cataloged every horror. Chemical waste seeping through ancient infrastructure, disease vectors multiplying in stagnant water, bodies that hadn't been collected for days rotting in forgotten alcoves. The transit shaft opened onto hive-bottom Tertius 7, a sprawling warren of corrugated metal hab units and makeshift structures built into the bones of ancient architecture. Flickering lumens cast everything in sickly yellow light. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire echoed. Gang warfare or tribal disputes, the local guide had explained with a shrug, as if such things were weather patterns to be noted and ignored. Superman stepped into the thoroughfare, and conversation stopped. He'd left the cape behind at Guilliman's suggestion, wore simple clothes provided by palace servants, but there was no hiding what he was. His physique alone marked him as different. Too healthy, too strong, too clean. Within seconds, he was surrounded by Terrans who'd never seen the sun, whose entire existence was confined to 3 square kilometers of underhive territory. Emperor's mercy, an old woman whispered, her augmetic eyes whirring as they focused on him. Are you one of them? The Astartes? No, Superman said gently. Just someone who wanted to meet you, to see how people really live here. The crowd swelled. Hands reached out, touching his arms with trembling fingers. A child, ribs visible through tattered clothing, stared up at him with eyes too old for his young face. The boy couldn't have been more than 8, but his hands were calloused from labor, and a gang tattoo marked his shoulder. You're from up Spire, the child stated, from where the nobles are. Superman knelt, bringing himself to eye level. I'm from farther away than that. Tell me your name. Kel. The boy didn't back away, which marked him as either brave or broken beyond fear. I work the reclamation lines, pulling copper wire from dead servitors. They pay 3 throne gelt per kilo. 3 throne gelt. Superman's crash course in imperial economics told him that wouldn't buy a decent meal. And your parents? Mum died in the collapse last year. Eastern Shaft gave way, took 40 HAB units with it. Kel said it without emotion, reciting facts like inventory. Dad's in the Guard, left when I was 4, probably dead on some world I can't pronounce. Superman felt something crack inside his chest. This child, this boy who should have been worried about school and games, was instead an orphan laborer in an industrial nightmare. And he wasn't unique. Superman's enhanced hearing told him there were thousands of stories like this within earshot alone. If you crave more tales from the dark millennium, a voice interrupted, you should visit the upper levels. Down here, we have plenty. An enforcer pushed through the crowd, flak armor dented, shock maul crackling with energy. His face bore the scarred cynicism of someone who'd seen too much and helped too little. You're creating a disturbance, stranger. Move along, or I'll cite you for unlawful assembly. These people just want to talk, Superman said, rising to full height. The enforcer was tall for a Terran, but Superman still had 15 centimeters on him. These people want to steal whatever you have, then sell your corpse to the corpse starch processors. The enforcer gestured with his maul. I've worked Tertius 7 for 20 years. I know how this story ends. Now move, or I'll make you move. The threat was absurd given Superman's capabilities, but the enforcer didn't know that. He was just doing his job, maintaining order in a place where order was measured by how many died per day, rather than how many thrived. Superman was about to respond when the child, Kel, tugged his sleeve. There's someone you should meet, the boy said. If you really want to understand, follow me. Against the enforcer's protests, Superman followed Kel through winding passages that grew progressively darker and more cramped. They passed through territories marked by gang signs, the Rust Prophets, the Throne Loyalists, the Ash Merchants. Each transition point was marked by shrines, tiny alcoves where candles burned before images of the Emperor depicted as everything from benevolent father to vengeful god. Kel led him to a chamber carved from the hive's foundations, so old it might have dated to before the Age of Strife. Inside, 200 people gathered around a makeshift stage where a woman spoke. She was elderly, wrapped in robes that had been patched 1,000 times, but her voice carried authority that made the crowd hang on every word. And he walked among us once, she was saying. The Emperor, before his ascension, knew hunger, knew pain, knew the suffering of ordinary humans. That's why he built the Imperium, not for the nobles, not for the Astartes, but for us. For the forgotten masses who labor in darkness so humanity might survive. Superman recognized a preacher when he saw one, but this wasn't the fanatic dogma he'd heard from the ecclesiarchy officials. This was something more grassroots, more genuine. The woman's audience didn't display the fearful devotion of state religion. They showed something more dangerous. They showed hope. And the scriptures speak of his sons returning, the preacher continued. The Primarchs, walking among us again. Guilliman has returned, yes, but the prophecies say others will follow. That one day a savior will come who remembers what the Imperium was supposed to be. The crowd murmured agreement. Some wept. Others clasped hands in prayer. Kel whispered to Superman, "That's Mother Arella. She used to be ecclesiarchy, but they cast her out for teaching that the Emperor wanted us to be happy, not just obedient. Now she preaches here, in the forgotten places, and people listen." Superman watched Mother Arella speak, watched her congregation draw strength from words of compassion in a galaxy that had forgotten the concept. And he realized what Guilliman had been trying to tell him, what Canoness Verena had warned about. Hope didn't just inspire these people, it consumed them. They were so starved for the possibility of something better that they'd created an entire underground theology around it. And if Hope could do this in the Underhive, what would his presence do across the Imperium? Mother Aralla's eyes found him in the crowd. She stopped mid-sentence, her enhanced sight, augmetic, Superman realized, focusing on his face. Her expression transformed from shock to something like religious ecstasy.
"Brothers and sisters,"
she said, voice trembling,
"we are witnessed. He has sent us a sign."
200 pairs of eyes turned toward Superman, and in that moment he understood the true danger of his arrival. These people didn't need a hero. They needed a god, and they were looking at him like he was exactly that. Superman left the Underhive with Mother Aralla's words echoing in his mind. "You are the answer to 10,000 years of prayer." He tried to tell them he wasn't, that he was just a visitor, but the damage was done. By the time he reached the surface, Vox traffic was already carrying whispers through the lower hive levels. A stranger from beyond. A figure of impossible power. The Primarch of Hope. The title made his skin crawl. What Superman didn't know, couldn't know, was that his presence was already tearing holes in reality itself. In the warp, the Imperium, the realm of souls and nightmares that pressed against the materium like an infection-seeking entry, something unprecedented was occurring. The 4 Chaos Gods, entities of such vast power that mortal minds couldn't comprehend their scope, felt it simultaneously. A void. A blank space where psychic energy should flow. A presence that rejected the warp not through negation like the Sisters of Silence, but through simple absolute incompatibility. In his brass citadel, Khorne, the blood god, watched as a demon prince attempting to manifest near Terra simply dissolved, not banished, not destroyed, unmade, as if the laws governing demonic existence temporarily forgot how to function. The blood god's rage, eternal and infinite, found new focus. "What is this anomaly?" His voice shattered realms, sent tidal waves of fury rippling through the warp. Blood reigned in kingdoms of brass as Khorne's attention turned fully toward the alien presence in the materium. It does not bleed. It does not rage. It exists outside the great game. In crystalline labyrinths that twisted through 9 dimensions simultaneously, Tzeentch, the architect of fate, discovered something far worse than ignorance. Prophecy breaking. Every timeline, every potential future he'd calculated for the Imperium's slow corruption, suddenly branched into static. Thousands of carefully laid plots, schemes within schemes within schemes, collapsed because this thing refused to follow the rules of causality the warp imposed. "Impossible," the Changer of Ways whispered through 9,000 mouths. "All things are threads in my design. All outcomes are known. Yet this creature exists outside my sight. A blind spot in omniscience. Unacceptable. Unacceptable." In the Garden of Nurgle, where disease was love and decay was rebirth, the plague god felt his most virulent creations simply stop. A plague ship near Terra's system, carrying 17 different demon plagues capable of reducing worlds to liquescent sludge, found its infections hibernating, not dying. Grandfather Nurgle's gifts never truly died, but sleeping, as if afraid to operate in proximity to whatever had entered reality. Curious, Nurgle burbled, his voice carrying affection even in concern. "Life is suffering. Suffering is change. Change is growth. But this being, it does not change, does not decay, does not accept the beautiful entropy all things must embrace. A static thing in an ever-changing universe. How problematic. And in the palace of pleasure, where sensation was currency and excess was virtue, Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, felt something that no god of sensation should ever experience: numbness. The emotions surrounding this alien presence were real enough: hope, determination, compassion. But they didn't feed the warp. They were closed systems, energy that generated nothing for the ruinous powers to consume. Boring, Slaanesh hissed with 1,000 tongues. Potential without corruption, strength without the desire to dominate, beauty without the hunger to possess it. This thing is an artistic void, an insult to sensation itself. For the first time in millennia, the 4 Chaos Gods reached consensus. Their eternal great game, the competition for souls and dominion that had defined reality since time immemorial, paused, not halted. The gods were fundamentally incapable of cooperation for long, but redirected. This anomaly had to be eliminated. On Terra, Superman was unaware of the cosmic attention he had drawn. He was too busy dealing with the immediate crisis his presence had created. The palace was in controlled chaos. Adeptus Ministorum cardinals demanded immediate theological conferences to determine if he was saint, heresy, or something in between. The Inquisition had dispatched 3 different ordos to investigate: Xenos, Hereticus, and Malleus, all claiming jurisdiction. Tech priests petitioned for genetic samples. Military commanders requested he tour their regiments to boost morale. And everywhere, the whispers grew louder. The 21st Primarch has returned. The Emperor's light made manifest. The savior of mankind walks among us. Gilliman found Superman in an observation chamber, staring out at Terra's hive spires with the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. "You're beginning to understand," the Primarch said without preamble, "what your presence means, what it's already causing." I went to the Underhive. Superman didn't turn around. Met a child laborer named Kal, barely 8 years old, orphaned, working himself to death for pennies. And he looked at me like I could fix everything wrong with his life, with this entire world. Can you? I don't know. For the first time since arriving, Superman's voice carried genuine uncertainty. In my reality, I could save people, catch falling planes, stop disasters, give people hope that tomorrow might be better. Here, the problems are so vast, so systemic, that I don't know where to begin. And worse, every time I try to help, people start worshiping me. They don't want a helper, they want a god. Then perhaps that's what you need to become. Gilliman moved to stand beside him. Not literally. The Emperor's divinity is already causing enough problems. But symbolically, the Imperium runs on symbols. The Aquila, the throne, my father's corpse god maintaining the Astronomicon while his empire crumbles. If you became another symbol, perhaps, he stopped. Every Vox unit in the palace suddenly screamed with static. Alarms blared. Through the viewport, Superman watched as Terra's sky, already amber with pollution, began to darken. Not with clouds, with something worse. The warp. Purple-black tears opened in reality, small at first, then growing. Gilliman's face went pale. A Primarch's face going pale meant something catastrophic was occurring. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Terra's warp defenses are impregnable. The Emperor's psychic might alone should prevent..." The tears widened, and through them, Superman saw eyes. Thousands of eyes, each belonging to entities his mind struggled to process. Things that were concept and flesh simultaneously, that existed in dimensions his Kryptonian senses weren't designed to perceive. Demons. His first encounter with chaos. But these weren't manifestations. They weren't breaking through into reality. They were just watching, studying him with intelligence that felt ancient and malevolent and utterly inhuman. Then, as one, they screamed. It was soundless and deafening, a psychic shriek that bypassed ears and struck directly at souls. Across Terra, 1 billion astropaths collapsed, blood streaming from their eyes. The Astronomicon flickered, and Superman heard it impossibly, the message embedded in the scream. Not words, but meaning translated through agony. The outsider, the void, the thing that should not be. The gods have seen you, the gods have judged you, the gods will unmake you. The rifts closed, the sky cleared. But the damage was done. Guilliman turned to Superman, and for the first time, the Primarch's composure cracked completely. "You need to leave Terra, now, before—" The Vox crackled. A voice, distorted by warp interference and distance, but recognizable. Canoness Verena, stationed in the outer system. "Lord Commander, warp translation detected at the Mandeville point. Energy signature matches. Emperor preserve us. It matches nothing in Imperial records. It's not a ship. It's not a fleet. It's a presence. Designation unknown. Intent hostile. All stations prepare for—" The transmission cut to screaming, then silence. Superman and Guilliman locked eyes. "They're coming for you," the Primarch said quietly. "Chaos itself is coming, and they're bringing something specifically designed to kill you." In the Eye of Terror, where reality surrendered to madness and physics were merely suggestions, the 4 Chaos Gods manifested their will in ways that defied comprehension. They did not speak. Words were too limiting. They did not plan. Time was meaningless in their realm. They simply acted, and the warp bent to accommodate impossibility. At the center of the maelstrom, where 4 domains touched without ever truly meeting, something new took shape. Khorne contributed rage. Not simple anger, but the fundamental fury of existence itself. The universe's violent rejection of entropy, condensed into martial perfection. Brass and blood swirled together, forming musculature that could shatter planets with a gesture. Tzeentch wove sorcery. 10,000 contradictory spells layered upon themselves, each one a paradox that nevertheless functioned. Blue and pink flames danced across emerging form. Reality-warping energy that could rewrite the laws of physics with thought alone. Nurgle gifted endurance. Diseases that made victims immortal through suffering. Plagues that fed on vitality to grant terrible strength. Green rot and infinite resilience merged, creating flesh that would regenerate faster than it could be destroyed. Slaanesh added cruelty. The exquisite agony of perfection denied, beauty weaponized into torture. Purple energies of sensation magnified beyond tolerance wove through the creation, ensuring that every wound inflicted would resonate with soul-deep pain. The 4 gods had never truly cooperated before. Their nature made sustained alliance impossible. Each sought dominion over the others. Each schemed for supremacy in the great game. But this threat, this anomaly that rejected the warp's fundamental rules, demanded unprecedented unity. For 17 days, or 17 eternities, or 17 seconds, time having no consistent meaning here, they worked. Daemon princes screamed and dissolved to provide raw material. Entire realms were unmade to fuel the forging. Mortal champions who'd served faithfully for centuries found their souls consumed as offerings to power the creation. And when they finished, the Chaos God stepped back from their masterwork and proclaimed it perfect. Zareth Ka, the Warp Primarch. He stood 4 meters tall, matching the Emperor's sons in stature but surpassing them in horror. His armor was living brass that wept blood, inscribed with runes that shifted between Tzeentch's impossible geometries and Slaanesh's maddening perfection. His flesh beneath bore Nurgle's resilience, rot that was somehow vital, decay that meant strength rather than weakness. His eyes burned with Khorne's eternal rage, twin furnaces of fury that had never known mercy. In his right hand, he carried a blade, forged from congealed warp energy, a sword that killed not just flesh, but concept, capable of severing a being's existence from reality itself. In his left, crackling chains of bound daemons, each link a captured greater demon enslaved to his will. But the true horror was his face. The gods had given him perfect features, beauty that could rival the Emperor himself. Then they'd ruined it systematically. One side burned by Khorne's rage, the other twisted by Tzeentch's sorceries, marked by Nurgle's plagues, and scarred by Slaanesh's excess. It was a face that showed what the Primarchs could have been if the Emperor had created them from chaos rather than resisting it. Zareth Ka! The 4 voices spoke as one, their combined will nearly tearing the Eye of Terror apart. You are purpose given form. You are our answer to the anomaly. You will hunt the outsider. You will break his body. You will corrupt his soul. And you will prove that nothing exists beyond our reach. The Warp Primarch opened his eyes fully for the first time. When he spoke, his voice carried 4 distinct tones simultaneously, a quad harmonic impossibility that should have been cacophony, but emerged as terrible clarity. I am born of your will. I am hatred given flesh. I am the answer to false hope. He raised his blade, and reality screamed. Where is this outsider who thinks himself beyond your dominion? Tzeentch's laughter echoed across crystalline dimensions. He sits at the heart of the Corpse Emperor's kingdom, on Terra itself, surrounded by the anathema's final servants. Then I shall bring Terra what it deserves, Zareth Ka declared. I shall show the Imperium what their precious hope truly costs. I shall break their savior before their eyes and prove that your truth is inevitable. Khorne's throne room trembled with approval. The Blood God demands worthy skulls. The outsider's will suffice. Nurgle's garden bloomed with diseased flowers. Show him, my child. Show him that stagnation comes for all. Even gods from beyond must eventually rot. Slaanesh's palace resonated with anticipation. Make his suffering exquisite. Make it art. Make it ecstasy wrapped in agony, wrapped in despair. The 4 gods channeled their power simultaneously. The Eye of Terror convulsed. Warp storms across the galaxy intensified. On 1,000 worlds, psychers collapsed as reality itself buckled under the weight of divine will being focused to singular purpose. A tear opened in the Imperium, not a subtle rift, but a wound that screamed across dozens of light years. Ships in the outer Sol system detected it immediately, a warp translation so violent it registered on instruments that shouldn't have been able to detect warp phenomena at all. Zareth Ka stepped through, and real space recoiled from his presence. Matter aged and corrupted around him. Light bent wrong. The laws of physics, so carefully maintained by the universe's fundamental forces, hesitated in his vicinity. He stood in the void between stars, Terra, a blue-green marble in the distance, and smiled. The expression was hideous. 4 different types of cruel amusement playing across features that kept shifting between perfect and profane. So this is the Imperium, he mused, testing his blade against empty space. Where it cut, reality bled. How fragile, how temporary, how desperate. He focused on Terra, eyes that were also windows into the warp narrowing with predatory intent. And somewhere on that overcrowded rock, an outsider plays at being salvation. Behind him, the warp rift widened further. Through it poured an army that made seasoned commanders weep. Bloodthirsters by the dozens, each one a killing machine capable of decimating space marine companies. Great unclean ones whose mere presence would trigger continent-wide plagues. Lords of change whose sorceries could unmake fortifications with a thought. Keepers of secrets who turned defenders into willing slaves. Demon engines the size of battle cruisers. Warp titans whose steps cracked planets. Soul grinders by the hundreds. And mortal cultists by the millions. Traitor Guard. Fallen Astartes from the traitor legions. Chaos worshippers who'd waited lifetimes for this moment. It was an invasion force meant for Cadia, for Armageddon, for wars that decided the fates of entire sectors, and it was all aimed at one target: Terra, the throne world, humanity's cradle and fortress. Zareth Ka raised his blade high, and the demon army roared its approval. The gods have spoken. His voice carried across the void, reaching every ship, every station, every soul in the Sol system, through means that transcended Vox transmission. I am their answer to your hope. I am the inevitable, and I bring you the truth your emperor feared to admit, that all things bow to chaos eventually. He pointed his blade at Terra. Begin the final siege. Bring me the outsider's head, and let the corpse god watch as his precious Imperium learns that hope is just another word for denial. The demon horde surged forward, and the defense of Terra began. The alarms that screamed across Terra weren't the routine warnings of pirate raids or opportunistic Xenos. These were the clarion calls reserved for extinction-level threats. The sounds that hadn't been heard at full intensity since the siege of Terra 10,000 years prior. Superman stood in the command strategium alongside Gilliman as hololithic displays painted the nightmare in cold tactical readouts. The Primarch's face was granite, but Superman could hear his heart, even a Primarch's heart, beating faster than normal. Approximately 400 greater demons, reported Fleet Admiral Koskinen, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. Demon engines numbering in the thousands. Warp titans confirmed, at least 6, possibly more obscured by the rift interference. And leading them, he paused, searching for words adequate to describe what sensors were detecting. A warp entity reading Primarch-level psychic signature. Multiple conflicting chaos allegiances detected simultaneously. Lord Commander, this is impossible. The gods don't cooperate like this. They do, Gilliman said quietly, when they're sufficiently motivated. His eyes found Superman. This is for you, all of it. They forged something specifically to kill you, and they're bringing an army to ensure no one interferes. Then I go out there, Superman said immediately. I end this before it reaches Terra. No. Gilliman's command voice could stop armies. You're thinking like a hero from your reality. This isn't one villain you can punch into submission. That's a warp-spawned army commanded by something the Chaos Gods themselves created. You fly out there alone, you die. Or worse, they corrupt you, turn you into a weapon against humanity. So what's your plan? Let them reach Terra? We do what the Imperium has always done. Guilliman activated the defense network. We make them bleed for every meter. We buy time for reinforcements. And we trust that the Emperor's light still has enough strength to protect his throne. He opened Vox channels to every defense station in the Sol system. This is Lord Commander Guilliman. All forces, condition Crimson Omega. The enemy comes for Terra itself. Man your stations, speak your prayers, and remember, we hold the line or humanity dies. The Emperor protects. Across the Sol system, humanity's most formidable defenses activated. The lunar defense grid, capable of glassing entire fleets, began cycling targeting protocols. Lance batteries the size of hive spires hummed with building charge. Missile silos that hadn't opened in centuries ground their ancient mechanisms into operation. The Terran orbital platforms, hundreds of them, each one a fortress in its own right, rotated to present their heaviest armor toward the incoming threat. Gun decks holding weapons that could crack continents loaded ammunition blessed by the ecclesiarchy and maintained by tech priests who'd spent lifetimes preparing for this moment. Battle barges of the Imperial Fists, forever guardians of Terra, broke orbit alongside strike cruisers from a dozen other chapters. The Grey Warriors of Titan, the Grey Knights who specialized in demon killing, prepared their rituals of banishment. Sisters of Battle filled the Sanctum Imperialis with prayers that became psychic shields. And deep within the palace, in the throne room where the Emperor of Mankind sat locked in his golden prison, the Adeptus Custodes, all 10,000 of them, prepared for battle. They hadn't deployed in full force since the Webway Wars. They were about to remember why they were called the Emperor's Companion. Captain General Valoris found Superman as the Kryptonian prepared to join the defense. The Custodian's auramite armor was polished to mirror perfection, every plate inscribed with oaths dating back to the Unification Wars. You asked me once what we are, Valoris said. We are the Emperor's final guardians, the ones who stand when all others have fallen. Today, you'll see what that means. He extended a guardian spear. Take this. It won't harm you, but its disruption field will tear demons apart. You'll need every advantage. Superman accepted the weapon, feeling its weight, perfectly balanced for beings of superhuman strength. I've never used a spear before. Then improvise. You're not Custodes. You don't need our precision. You're something else entirely. Use that. Valoris turned to leave, then paused. The enemy comes for you specifically. They'll ignore strategic targets to reach you. Use that against them. Be the bait that draws them into our kill zones. Be the symbol that makes our defenders fight harder. Be what this Imperium needs. A reason to believe that holding the line matters. The first contact came at the Mandeville Point, where ships translated from warp travel into real space. The Imperial Navy's outer picket, 36 frigates and destroyers, engaged immediately. Lance batteries and macro cannons filled the void with devastating fire. It wasn't enough. Demon engines shrugged off hits that should have vaporized them. Greater demons manifested directly aboard Imperial ships, bypassing void shields through warp sorcery. A bloodthirster materialized on the bridge of the frigate Undaunted Faith, killed the entire command crew in 4 seconds, and ripped the ship's plasma reactor apart with its bare hands. The outer picket died in 17 minutes. Not one ship escaped. Superman watched the feeds from the Strategium. watched brave men and women die buying Terra precious seconds. His fists clenched until the Guardian spear's haft creaked under the pressure. "I can reach them," he said. "I can save those ships." "Those ships are already dead," Guilliman replied, voice heavy with the weight of 10,000 years of triage decisions. "You leave this command center. You abandon Terra's coordination. You play the hero for a few hundred sailors. You potentially doom billions." He placed a massive hand on Superman's shoulder. "This is command. This is what it means to lead in this galaxy. You don't save everyone. You save as many as you can by making the choices that maximize survival. Hate me for it later. Right now, focus." The demon fleet advanced. Behind it, visible through the warp rift like a dark god surveying his kingdom, Zarath-Ka stood on a floating platform of congealed warp energy. His blade was already drawn, already hungry. The lunar defenses opened fire. Macro cannons designed to destroy ships poured fire into the demon horde. Lance strikes that could pierce adamantium burned through warp-spawned flesh. Missiles whose warheads held the blessed wrath of the Mechanicus exploded in clusters that lit the void like newborn stars. For a moment, one glorious moment, it seemed like it might be enough. Dozens of greater demons dissolved under concentrated fire. Demon engines tumbled, their corrupted machine spirits finally killed. Lesser demons by the thousands simply ceased to exist as the Emperor's light, channeled through consecrated weapons, burned them from reality. Then Zarath-Ka raised his hand, and everything changed. Warp energy poured from his palm in a wave that turned space purple. Where it touched Imperial fire, munitions detonated prematurely. Lance beams bent and curved back toward the platforms that fired them. Missiles developed sudden sentience and turned on their launchers. The lunar defenses, humanity's impregnable first line, died screaming. Superman watched a defense platform, home to 10,000 souls, crack in half as its own lances reflected into its heart. Watched a weapons battery explode as corrupted ammunition cooked off in its magazines. Watched Luna itself shudder as orbital strikes meant for demons impacted the surface instead. "Emperor, preserve us," Koskinen whispered. He just countered the entire lunar grid with one gesture." Guilliman's jaw tightened. "All forces fall back to Terra orbit. Prepare for close quarters defense, and someone," he looked at Superman, "get ready to meet your opposite number, because he's coming, and he's bringing hell with him." The retreat to Terra's orbital sphere was controlled chaos. Ships that had held formation for decades scattered like leaves before a storm, racing to reach the relative safety of the throne world's innermost defenses. Demon engines pursued, their corrupted hulls moving with predatory intent that defied physics. Superman stood on the observation deck of the battle barge Phalanx, the Imperial Fist's legendary fortress monastery. Around him, Space Marines moved with practiced efficiency, their yellow armor a stark contrast to the void's darkness. Chapter Master Gregor Dezion, a veteran of 400 years of warfare, stood beside him in Terminator plate, storm bolter mag-locked to his hip. "First time seeing this scale of demon incursion?" Dazion's voice carried the gravitas of centuries. "I've fought alien invaders before," Superman replied, watching the demon fleet advance. "But nothing like this. These things, they don't follow any rules I understand. They follow the warp's rules. Belief made manifest. Emotion given teeth." Dezion gestured to the fleet. "Every demon out there exists because somewhere, someone gave into rage, or despair, or ambition. Their humanity's sins made real and hungry. He turned to Superman. "Which is why you terrify them. You're the opposite. Hope that refuses corruption. Strength without the desire to dominate. They can't comprehend you, so they'll destroy you." The Vox crackled. Gilliman's voice transmitted fleet-wide. "All forces, the enemy has breached Luna's defense sphere. Engage at optimal range. Remember your training. Remember your faith. The Emperor watches over us all." The Imperial fleet opened fire. Battleships unleashed broadside after broadside. Strike cruisers launched fighter wings. Thunderhawks and Furies whose pilots knew they were unlikely to return. The Phalanx itself, a vessel so ancient and powerful it was effectively mobile fortress, fired weapons that could level mountains. Superman watched a bloodthirster, 40 meters of brass and rage and fury, take a direct hit from a lance battery. The beam should have vaporized it. Instead, the demon simply roared, its warp-spawned essence regenerating faster than physical weapons could destroy it. "They're not dying," Superman said. "Your weapons are hitting, but they're not dying." "Conventional weapons wound them," Desian explained. "Blessed weapons, psychic attacks, Grey Knights, those kill them. Everyone else just buys time." He activated his power fist, the weapon humming with disruption field energy. "Watch, learn. This is how we've survived for 10,000 years." A soul grinder, demon engine hybrid of machine and warp flesh, latched onto the Phalanx's hull. Its harvester cannon began cutting through void shields. Desian didn't hesitate. He mag-locked to the hull, walked through the emergency airlock, and engaged the thing in void combat. Superman watched through the viewport as the chapter master fought. Each blow from the power fist was precise, targeting joints and weak points identified through millennia of compiled demon fighting experience. The soul grinder was larger, more powerful, manifestly more dangerous. But Desian was professional. No wasted movement, no excess aggression, just clinical dismantling of an enemy. The power fist punched a hole through the soul grinder's central mass, disruption field tearing at the demon's essence. The creature screamed, a sound that carried through void despite physics saying it shouldn't, and dissolved into purple smoke. Desian returned to the ship, his armor scarred but intact. "That's competence," he said simply. "We can't match them in raw power. We match them in skill, training, and the Emperor's blessing. Now multiply that philosophy across 10,000 years of warfare." But even skill had limits. A great unclean one manifested directly aboard a battle barge, bypassing shields through warp sorcery. The plague demon moved through the ship like infection through a body, corrupting crew with a touch. Within minutes, 300 Space Marines were fighting not the demon but their own brothers, now twisted into plague Marines by Nurgle's foul gifts. A Lord of Change appeared in the void and changed reality. Suddenly, half the Imperial fleet thought they were firing on traitors. Loyal ships turned weapons on each other, coordination collapsing into fratricidal madness. It took 3 Grey Knights to banish the demon, and by then, 24 ships were crippled or destroyed by friendly fire. The demon fleet reached Terra's orbital sphere. That's when the Adeptus Custodes entered the battle. 10,000 golden warriors deployed from the Imperial Palace in specialized assault craft. They hit the demon fleet like the wrath of a dead god made manifest. Where Space Marines fought with skill and faith, Custodes fought with absolute perfection. Every move the culmination of 10,000 years of unbroken training, every blow delivered with precision that made physics weep. Superman watched through Vox feeds as Custodes boarded demon engines. They didn't just fight, they dominated. A single custodian would drop into a corridor filled with demons and clear it in seconds, Guardian's spear becoming a blur of aura might and disruption fields. They moved like Superman moved, but with techniques refined across millennia. Valorous himself led an assault on a demon prince, a once mortal champion elevated to godhood by Khorne. The fight lasted 4 minutes. At the end, Valorous stood over a dissipating corpse, his armor barely scratched. "They're incredible," Superman breathed. "They're the Emperor's finest," Decian agreed. "And they're losing." It was true. For every demon the Custodes banished, 3 more manifested. The warp rift was still open, still pouring corruption into reality, and advancing through the center of it all, untouched by Imperial fire, came Zareth Ka. The warp Primarch stood on his platform of congealed chaos, surveying the battle with 4 different types of amusement. When lance strikes targeted him, reality simply bent around the attacks. When missiles approached, they transmuted into flowers mid-flight. When the Grey Knights attempted to banish him with psychic rites, he laughed, and their powers reflected back, killing 3 of them instantly. "Impressive!" His voice boomed across every Vox channel, uninvited and unstoppable. "The Corpse Emperor's slaves still remember how to die with dignity. But where is he? Where is the outsider who thinks himself beyond the gods' reach?" Gilliman's voice, tight with controlled fury. "All ships, concentrate fire on the warp entity. Everything we have. Now." The entire Imperial fleet focused on Zareth Ka. Battleships fired simultaneously. Strike some cruisers emptied their magazines. The phalanx itself unleashed weapons held in reserve for Horus's return. The bombardment would have cracked a continent, would have vaporized fleets, would have killed anything mortal or demon. Zarathka stood in the center of the firestorm and smiled. His blade moved once, a single slash through empty space, and every weapon that had fired suddenly reversed trajectory, homing back toward the ships that launched them. "Insufficient," the Warp Primarch declared. "I was forged by gods to kill a god. Your toys cannot harm me." Superman had seen enough. "I'm going out there. You'll die," Decian warned. "Maybe." Superman walked toward the airlock. "But I'm the one he wants. I'm the one the Chaos Gods made him to fight. If I don't face him, he'll tear through your entire fleet to reach me anyway." Gilliman's voice crackled through the Vox. "Superman, wait for coordination. There's no time." Superman pulled on the Guardian's spear, feeling its weight. "You wanted to know if I could save this galaxy with kindness? Let's start by drawing the monster away from your soldiers." He stepped into the airlock and Decian sealed it behind him. Through the viewport, the chapter master gave a single nod of respect. Then Superman launched into the void, cape streaming behind him in solar wind, flying toward a demon built by gods specifically to end him. Zareth Ka's eyes locked onto him, and the Warp Primarch's smile became something monstrous. "Finally!" he roared. "The anomaly shows himself. Come, outsider. Let me show you what the gods think of your hope." The void between Terra and the demon fleet became a battlefield unlike anything the Sol system had witnessed. Superman accelerated to combat speed, the Guardian's spear held like a lance, his cape somehow billowing despite the vacuum. Behind him, the Imperial fleet held formation. Weapons trained but not firing. They couldn't risk hitting their unexpected champion. Zareth Ka watched the approach with 4 different kinds of anticipation. His platform of congealed warp energy dissolved as he stepped into the void, standing on nothing, physics bending around him like a subject bowing before a king. "So, the outsider comes to me," the Warp Primarch announced, his voice carrying through vox channels and psychic frequencies simultaneously. "How noble, how predictable, how pathetically heroic." Superman didn't respond with words. He responded with speed. One moment, he was a kilometer away. The next, his fist connected with Zareth Ka's jaw with the force of a meteorite impact. The shock wave rippled outward, sending nearby demons tumbling through space. Zareth Ka's head snapped back, then slowly returned to center. The impact point on his jaw showed no damage. Instead, the flesh rippled with Nurgle's resilience, reforming instantly. His smile widened. "Yes, good. The anomaly has strength." He moved faster than Superman anticipated, blades sweeping in an arc that should have been impossible to dodge. Superman dodged anyway, enhanced reflexes letting him twist mid-air, mid-void, as the blade passed close enough to sever atoms. Where it cut through space, reality bled purple energy. The Guardian spear came up in a counterstrike, its disruption field active. The spear connected with Zareth Ka's armored chest. For the first time, the Warp Primarch's expression showed something other than amusement. Surprise. The blessed weapon channeling the Emperor's will through auramite and ancient tech actually wounded him. Black ichor that might have been blood, or might have been liquid warp stuff sprayed from the impact point.
Interesting,
Zareth Ka said, examining the wound as it healed. Slower this time. The weapon actually hurt him. The anathema's touch remains potent even in death. But let me show you what the god's will can do. He gestured with his left hand, and the chains of bound demons lashed out. Each link was a greater demon compressed and enslaved, their combined psychic weight enough to drag down a titan. They wrapped around Superman's arms, legs, torso, and began to burn. Not physical fire, warp fire, energy that attacked the soul rather than flesh. Superman had never felt anything like it. Pain that bypassed his invulnerability. Agony that reached into something deeper than his Kryptonian cells. He screamed, heat vision firing reflexively, burning through several chain links. The freed demons dissipated, but more chains replaced them. Zareth Ka pulled Superman closer, close enough that Superman could see his face in detail. The four-way corruption, the eyes that looked into dimensions Superman's senses couldn't comprehend. Pain to him. The Warp Primarch whispered, almost gently. A new sensation for you, yes. In your reality, nothing could truly harm you. Here, everything can. The Warp does not care about your invulnerability. It cares only about your essence, and your essence, outsider, is deliciously vulnerable. Superman's response was to headbutt him. The impact cracked Zareth Ka's nose, or the approximation of a nose on a shifting face. Superman followed with the Guardian spear, driving it through the chains, through the warp energy, straight toward the demon's heart. Zareth Ka caught the spear one-handed, stopped it centimeters from his chest. Where his fingers gripped the auramite, the metal began to corrode, brass replacing gold. Corruption spreading along the haft. No simple weapons will end me, he declared. I am the culmination of four gods' will. I am rage and sorcery and pestilence and excess made singular. What are you, an alien with fortunate biology? A cosmic accident playing at heroism? I'm someone who won't quit. Superman tore free from the chains through sheer strength, flesh burning but unbroken. His heat vision lanced out, twin beams of concentrated solar energy striking Zareth Ka's face. The warp Primarch screamed. Not in pain, in outrage. The heat vision was burning through his warp essence, cauterizing wounds faster than even Nurgle's gifts could heal them. Tzeentch's sorceries flared, trying to redirect the energy, but heat vision wasn't physical matter. It was pure electromagnetic radiation, and it didn't care about reality warping magic. "Solar energy!" Zareth Ka snarled, one hand covering his burning face. "Of course. The one power's source the warp cannot easily corrupt. Clever, but insufficient." His blade moved in patterns Superman could barely track, each cut opening reality itself. The void suddenly filled with hazards, pockets of altered physics where up became down, where time ran backward, where Superman's strength became crushing weight, pulling him toward Terra. Superman adapted on instinct, using his flight to compensate for shifting gravity, his speed to avoid the reality tears. He hurled the Guardian Spear like a javelin, putting Kryptonian strength behind aura might blessed by the Emperor's hand. The spear punched through Zareth Ka's shoulder, pinning him to empty space. Somehow, impossibly, the weapon found purchase where there should be none. The warp Primarch roared, and the sound made nearby ships' crews collapse, blood streaming from their ears. "Enough games," Zareth Ka declared. He gripped the spear and tore it from his flesh, then snapped the ancient weapon like kindling. "I wanted to savor your destruction, but you're proving more resilient than anticipated. Time to end this." Behind him, the warp rift widened. Through it came not more demons, but pure warp energy, the raw stuff of chaos itself, unfiltered and undiluted. It coalesced around Zareth Ka like armor over armor, like power magnified 1,000-fold. Superman felt it in his bones. Whatever reserves the warp Primarch had been holding back, he was unleashing now. This wasn't a test anymore. This was an execution. "4 gods made me," Zareth Ka said, his form growing larger, more terrible, bleeding into unreality. "4 gods fuel me, and 4 gods will watch as I tear you apart and feed your hope to the warp." He moved, and Superman barely registered the motion before impact. They collided with the force of dying stars, the shockwave visible from Terra's surface. The two beings, one from beyond reality, one born of reality's darkest depths, plummeted toward the throne world, locked in combat that lit the sky like a second sun. Below, on Terra's surface, billions looked up and saw their salvation and damnation wrestling in the heavens. In the Underhive, Mother Arella and young Kel watched through a cracked viewport as fire fell toward their world. "Is he winning?" Kel whispered. Mother Arella, her augmetic eyes tracking the battle, said nothing, because she didn't know. Nobody did. In the palace strategium, Gilliman watched the battle unfold with the tactical mind of a Primarch analyzing every exchange. "Get me every Grey Knight on Terra," he ordered. "Every Sister of Battle, every Custodian not currently engaged. If that thing reaches the surface with Superman, we'll need everything we have to contain the fallout." Admiral Koskinen's voice was hollow. "Lord Commander, what if Superman loses?" Gilliman's expression was granite. "Then we defend Terra the way we always have, with blood, faith, and the certainty that we will not yield. Not today, not ever." In the void, Superman and Zareth Ka fell toward judgment, neither willing to break, neither able to stop. and Terra waited below to see which form of salvation, or damnation, would reach it first. They struck Terra's upper atmosphere at terminal velocity, two bodies locked in combat that turned re-entry into apocalypse. The shockwave shattered windows across the Imperial Palace. Orbital stations tracked their descent like a meteor strike, calculating impact zones with grim efficiency. Superman had both hands wrapped around Zareth Ka's throat, squeezing with Kryptonian strength that could crush steel to powder. The Warp Primarch's blade was buried in Superman's side, the wound burning with 4 different types of corruption. They tumbled through clouds that evaporated from their passage, air superheating around them until they were wrapped in a cocoon of plasma.
You bleed,
Zareth Ka laughed, twisting the blade.
The invincible outsider bleeds. How does it feel knowing your perfection was a lie?
Superman's response was to increase the pressure on Zareth Ka's throat while simultaneously unleashing his heat vision point blank. Twin beams of solar fury carved into the Warp Primarch's face, melting through layers of corruption and divine enhancement. For the first time, Zareth Ka's laughter turned to genuine pain. They impacted the Gobi Reclamation Zone, 1,000 kilometers from the Imperial Palace. The crater stretched 2 kilometers across. The impact registered on seismographs across Terra, a localized earthquake that sent millions to their knees. Dust clouds mushroomed skyward, blocking the sun for hundreds of kilometers. In the center of devastation, Superman rose first. His costume was torn, the S-shield partially burned away. Blood, red, human-looking blood, leaked from the wound in his side. But he stood, Guardian spear fragments still clutched in one hand, eyes blazing with determination that refused to acknowledge defeat. Zareth Ka emerged from the opposite side of the crater. Half his face was a burned ruin, exposing bone that might have been brass or ivory or solidified warp stuff. His armor had cracked, revealing flesh beneath that cycled through decay and regeneration too fast for mortal eyes to track. But he was smiling, always smiling. Magnificent, the Warp Primarch said, genuine appreciation in his quad-harmonic voice. You could have been glorious. The gods would have welcomed you. Imagine it. Your strength, enhanced by Khorne's rage. Your mind, elevated by Tzeentch's wisdom. Your flesh, perfected by Nurgle's gifts. Your passion, magnified by Slaanesh's rapture. I've met your kind before, Superman said, moving toward him with purpose despite the wound. Darkseid promised power. Brainiac promised knowledge. Doomsday promised strength through endless evolution. They were all wrong. Power without compassion is just tyranny. Knowledge without wisdom is just data. Strength without purpose is just violence. Pretty words. Zareth Ka's blade reformed, demonic essence flowing back into shape. But words don't win wars. Strength does. Will does. The willingness to do what must be done, no matter the cost. He charged, and Superman met him. They collided in the crater's center. 2 philosophies made flesh, trading blows that shattered stone and split air. Superman's fists hammered with precise brutality, each strike aimed at weak points, joints, organs, the spaces where corruption overlapped and created structural vulnerabilities. Zareth Ka's blade wove patterns of death, cutting reality with every slash, leaving wounds that wouldn't fully heal. Around them, the crater began to fill, not with water or lava, but with witnesses. Imperial Guard units arrived first, chimeras and sentinels forming a perimeter. Then Space Marines, Black Templars, Crimson Fists, companies from a dozen chapters who'd been stationed on Terra for ceremonial purposes suddenly finding themselves front row to doomsday. Sisters of battle in white armor knelt in prayer circles, their faith becoming psychic shields that pushed back against the warp energy radiating from Zareth Ka. And the Custodes came, golden giants dropping from thunderhawks, forming concentric rings of auramite and absolute discipline. Captain General Valoris led them, his guardian spear held ready, waiting for the moment when intervention became necessity. "Hold position," Valoris commanded through Vox. "This is the outsider's fight. We engage only if he falls." "And if he wins?" asked Shield Captain Hastius. "Then we have witnessed something the Imperium hasn't seen in 10 millennia. A being of pure intent defeating chaos through refusal rather than corruption." Valorus's voice carried weight. "Watch, learn, and pray the Emperor still guards those with true faith." Superman heard them. Every heartbeat, every whispered prayer, every soldier wondering if they were about to watch salvation or damnation unfold. The weight of their hope pressed down on him almost as heavily as Zareth Ka's blade. The Warp Primarch noticed too. "You hear them, don't you? The desperate, the dying, the deluded masses who think you can save them." He parried Superman's strike, countered with a slash that opened Superman's arm shoulder to elbow. "They're right to hope, wrong about the outcome. When I kill you, their hope dies too. And hopelessness, that's when the gods feast best. Then you don't understand hope at all." Superman's heat vision lanced out, forcing Zareth Ka back. "Hope isn't about certainty. It's not about knowing you'll win. It's about fighting anyway. Choosing to stand when falling is easier. Choosing light when darkness is everywhere." He pressed forward, driving Zareth Ka toward the crater's edge. "You were made by gods who thrive on suffering. I was raised by farmers who believed in doing right because it's right. We're not the same." "No!" Zareth Ka agreed, and suddenly his free hand shot out, faster than Superman could dodge. Warp chains erupted from his palm, wrapping around Superman's chest, arms, legs. "We're not. You're prey. I'm predator. And prey always loses." The chains tightened, and Superman felt his ribs crack. Actually crack, despite Kryptonian durability. The warp energy was burning through him, attacking his cellular structure at a fundamental level. His vision blurred. His strength began to fade. Around the crater, soldiers watched their champion fall to his knees. Some looked away. Others wept. Mother Arella, watching through a distant Vox feed in the Underhive, closed her eyes and prayed to an emperor who might or might not be listening. Young Kel, standing beside her, didn't look away. Couldn't look away. He'd seen this pattern before. Authority crushing hope, power grinding down the weak, the strong proving that might makes right. It was the story of the Imperium, written across 10,000 years of corpses. But something was different this time. Superman was smiling. "You talk a lot," he said through gritted teeth, blood on his lips, "about what I don't understand. Let me show you what you don't understand." He didn't break the chains through strength. He couldn't. They were feeding on his power, growing stronger with every surge of energy he pushed through them. Instead, he did something the Warp Primarch couldn't predict. He flew up. Straight up, as fast as he could manage with chains digging into his flesh. Zareth Ka, caught off guard, was yanked upward, the chains connecting them like a tether. They shot through Terra's atmosphere again, this time ascending, breaking cloud cover, reaching the upper atmosphere where air thinned to nothing. And Superman kept going, into low orbit, higher, beyond geostationary satellites, into the raw, unfiltered light of Sol, Terra's sun, the yellow sun that powered every cell in Superman's body, the star that made him, by accident of physics and biology, into something impossible. Superman spread his arms, chains still attached, and bathed in solar radiation. He felt his cells drinking in the energy, felt his strength return faster than warp corruption could drain it. His wounds began to close, his vision cleared. And the chains, the warp chains that thrived on suffering and darkness, began to smoke. Zarathka realized his mistake too late. No, the light, it burns. "Welcome to my domain," Superman said. Then he ignited. Not literally, but his body became a conduit for solar energy, absorbing and redirecting electromagnetic radiation with an efficiency that made physics professors weep. He became, for those few seconds, less a being, and more a solar flare given will. The chains dissolved. Zarathka screamed, all four voices screaming different types of agony, as the light that powered Superman began cooking warp essence that had never been meant to face unfiltered stellar fury. Superman grabbed the warp Primarch by the throat and dove. They fell back toward Terra, but this time Superman controlled the descent, using his flight to guide their trajectory, not toward the Gobi Reclamation Zone this time, toward the Imperial Palace, toward the assembled might of the Adeptus Custodes, the Grey Knights, the Sisters of Battle, toward every demon-killing weapon and banishment ritual humanity had developed over 10,000 years of warfare. "You wanted to prove that chaos always wins," Superman said as they fell. "Let's see how well that theory holds up." They impacted the Imperial Palace's outer courtyard, the same courtyard where Superman had first met Guilliman, the same space where Custodes had first surrounded him with guardian spears raised. Now those same golden warriors formed a perfect circle, 300 strong, every weapon aimed inward at the crater Superman and Zarathka had created. Superman rolled to his feet, burned and bleeding, but still standing. Zarathka rose opposite him, but for the first time since manifesting, the warp Primarch looked diminished. The solar immersion had done damage that even four gods' gifts couldn't immediately repair. His armor was cracked, his blade flickered between solid and ethereal, and his face, his terrible, four-way corrupted face, showed something uncomfortably close to concern. "Now!" Valorous commanded. The Custodes attacked as one, a choreographed assault refined across 10,000 years. Guardian spears struck from every angle, disruption fields tearing at warp essence. They didn't swarm. That implied chaos. This was precision, each custodian targeting specific points on Zarathka's form, exploiting weaknesses that centuries of demon fighting had taught them to recognize. Zarathka's blade moved in desperate defense, but he was fighting gods themselves, the Emperor's chosen, his personal guardians, the 10,000 who had never known defeat because they refused to acknowledge the concept. A spear pierced his shoulder, another carved through his leg, a third opened his chest, auramite burning through corruption like cauterizing fire. "Impossible!" Zarathka roared. "I am forged by four gods!" "We are forged by the Emperor," Valorous interrupted, his own spear punching through the warp Primarch's defense to score a hit across his throat. "And one Emperor is worth four pretenders. Grey Knights teleported into position, their psychic hoods glowing with accumulated power. Brother Captain Arvan Stern led them, the legendary demon slayer whose name was whispered in the warp with fear. His nemesis force weapon blazed with silver fire. "In the Emperor's name," Stern intoned, and 50 Grey Knights joined the prayer, their combined faith becoming a weapon more terrible than any blade. "Let none survive. Let none escape. Let the corruption be cleansed." Psychic fire erupted around Zareth-Ka, not burning his flesh, but attacking his existence itself. The Warp Primarch screamed. Truly screamed this time, all 4 voices harmonizing in agony, as reality reasserted itself around him. The god's gift was being rejected, pushed out, banished back to the hell that spawned it. Sisters of Battle added their voices. Canoness Verena led the prayers, her Order of Our Martyred Lady forming sanctified barriers that contained the warp energy, prevented it from spreading and corrupting the palace grounds. They sang hymns that had been sung since the age of apostasy, songs of faith that became psychic shields. And behind them all, positioned at the crater's edge, Space Marines from a dozen chapters prepared their specialized weapons. Plasma guns superheated. Melta weapons built charge. Heavy bolters loaded consecrated ammunition. They waited with the patience of angels, ready to unleash hell the moment the Grey Knight's banishment ritual weakened their target enough. Superman watched it all and understood. This was the Imperium at its finest. Not the grinding bureaucracy, not the casual cruelty, not the industrial-scale suffering. This was humanity refusing to die. This was 10,000 years of accumulated expertise focused on one purpose: survival against impossible odds. Zareth-Ka felt it too. Felt his connection to the warp being severed. Felt the god's power draining as consecrated ground and accumulated faith pushed back against corruption. He lashed out with his blade, killed 3 custodies with wild slashes, launched chains that grabbed 2 Grey Knights and crushed them, unleashed warp energy that forced the Sisters of Battle back. But it wasn't enough. It had never been enough. Because Superman had done what Zareth-Ka couldn't predict. He'd drawn the fight to the most fortified location in the Imperium, surrounded the demon with humanity's greatest weapons, and turned this from a duel into an execution.
"You tricked me!"
Zareth-Ka snarled, his form beginning to destabilize.
"You played the fool while leading me to slaughter."
"I learned from the best," Superman replied, thinking of Batman's tactical lessons, of Wonder Woman's warrior wisdom. "You wanted to prove chaos always wins? I just proved that hope backed by competence wins better." Gilliman's voice boomed across the courtyard, amplified by voxcasters. The Primarch himself strode into view, the Emperor's sword drawn and blazing with holy fire. "Zareth-Ka, puppet of false gods, you are judged and found wanting. This is Terra. This is humanity's heart, and you will not defile it." The Emperor's sword swung, and reality screamed. The blade, forged by the Emperor himself and wielded by his returned son, was more than metal. It was will made manifest, hope weaponized, faith given edge. It struck Zareth-Ka's chest and drove through, piercing the Warp Primarch's heart, if he had one, and emerging from his back in a spray of black ichor. Zareth-Ka's eyes went wide. All 4 corruptions flickered at once. Khorne's rage, Tzeentch's sorcery, Nurgle's rot, Slaanesh's excess, trying to sustain him, trying to regenerate the fatal wound. But the Emperor's sword didn't just kill flesh. It killed essence, its severed connection to the warp itself. "No," Zareth Ka whispered, his quad harmonic voice fading to something almost mortal. "The gods! They promised I was supposed to be inevitable." "Nothing is inevitable," Superman said quietly, stepping forward to stand beside Guilliman. "Not even damnation. That's what hope means. The possibility that tomorrow might be different." Zareth Ka tried to speak, but his form was collapsing. The warp energy sustaining him evaporated, banished by the combined might of Custodes, Grey Knights, Sisters, and the Emperor's own blade. His body began to dissolve, corruption unraveling into smoke and screams. "Remember this, outsider," the Warp Primarch's fading voice echoed. "The gods will send others. They will never stop. You cannot save this galaxy. You can only delay the inevitable." "Then I'll delay it," Superman replied. "For as long as it takes. That's what heroes do." Zareth Ka dissolved completely, his essence screaming back into the warp. The crater he left behind was smoking, the stone scorched with symbols that would need to be sanctified and rebuilt. But he was gone, banished, defeated. Silence filled the courtyard. 300 Custodes stood at attention, 15 of their number dead, their sacrifice measured and accepted. The Grey Knights began prayers of purification, cleansing the area of lingering corruption. Sisters of Battle tended to the wounded. Their faith now turned to healing rather than warfare. And in the center of it all, Guilliman looked at Superman with an expression the Kryptonian couldn't quite read. "You used yourself as bait," the Primarch said. "Drew him here, weakened him in orbit, then let Terra's defenses finish the job." "I learned from watching you," Superman admitted. "From seeing how this Imperium survives. Not through individual heroism, but through coordinated effort. Through competence multiplied by preparation, multiplied by faith." He looked down at his hands, still bleeding from warp chain burns. "I couldn't beat him alone, but I didn't have to. That's the real strength here." Gilman was quiet for a moment, then did something Superman hadn't seen before. The Primarch smiled, genuinely smiled, not the diplomatic expression or the cynical smirk, but honest satisfaction. "Perhaps there's hope for you yet," Guilliman said. "You're learning. That's more than most manage in this galaxy." Around them, the assembled forces began to stand down. The immediate crisis was over, but above, in orbit, the demon fleet still raged. The warp rift still gaped. And across the Imperium, 1 billion worlds held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Because Superman had just done something the Imperium hadn't seen in 10 millennia. He'd faced a warp-spawned Primarch, something built specifically to kill him, and won. Not through invulnerability, not through raw power, but through strategy, adaptation, and the willingness to trust in others. The Imperium was watching. The galaxy was watching. And most importantly, the Chaos Gods themselves were watching, recalculating, understanding that this outsider might be more dangerous than they'd anticipated, not because he was strong, but because he was learning. The victory celebration lasted exactly 4 minutes before reality reasserted itself. Superman stood in the crater, catching his breath for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, when the Vox channels erupted with fresh panic. "Lord Commander!" Admiral Koskinen's voice carried barely controlled terror. "The demon fleet. They're not retreating. Without Zareth Ka's leadership, they're going berserk, attacking everything, each other, our ships." They've turned the orbital sphere into a slaughterhouse. Gilliman's expression hardened instantly. Tactical display. Now. A hololithic projection materialized above the crater, showing Terra's orbital space in miniature. Superman's enhanced vision picked out the details immediately. Demon engines tearing into each other without coordination. Greater demons manifesting and immediately attacking whatever was nearest. Warp energy spreading like infection through the fleet battle. They're not retreating because they can't, Superman realized. They came through that warp rift specifically to kill me. Without Zareth-Ka directing them, they're just mindless hunger. Not mindless, Gilliman corrected. Purposeless. Demons exist for specific goals. Bloodshed for Khorne, schemes for Tzeentch, spread of plague for Nurgle, excess for Slaanesh. Remove their unified purpose, and they revert to base nature, which means they'll attack anything with a soul, Valoris finished, including Terra itself. We need to close that rift before more manifest. How? Superman asked. I hit Zareth-Ka with everything I had, including orbital solar exposure. I don't have the power to close something that size. The custodian, Captain General, turned to him. You don't, but the Emperor does. The question is whether he can spare the attention. They moved as one toward the inner palace, toward the throne room Superman had never entered. Custodes cleared the path with practiced efficiency, sealing doors behind them, activating defenses that had remained dormant for millennia. The deeper they went, the more Superman felt it. A presence vast beyond comprehension, pressed down by agony and duty into something barely human anymore. The golden throne chamber dwarfed anything Superman had seen. The throne itself was a mountain of archaeotech and suffering. Life support systems the size of buildings, psychic conductors that channeled power across the entire galaxy. And seated within, more corpse than man, sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily, was the Emperor of mankind. Superman's superhearing picked up the screaming immediately. Not the Emperor, he was far beyond such things, but the dying psychers in the chambers below, their souls being consumed to keep the Astronomicon burning, to hold back the warp, to maintain the throne's function. 1,000 deaths every day, for 10,000 years, so humanity could survive. This is your God, Superman whispered, horror evident in his voice. This is our sacrifice, Gilliman corrected, standing before the throne with the reverence of a son before his dying father. The Emperor sits in agony, so the galaxy can navigate the warp. So humanity has hope of coordination across the void, so we don't fall into isolation and extinction. The Primarch looked at Superman. You asked what survival cost in this galaxy. This is the price. Before Superman could respond, something reached out to his mind. Not words. Superman had no psychic potential. His Kryptonian brain simply didn't interface with the warp in any way. But meaning, transmitted through sheer overwhelming presence. The outsider. The hope that walks. The void the warp cannot touch. Superman felt the Emperor's attention like a physical weight, like standing beneath a collapsing mountain while simultaneously being evaluated by something infinite. You cannot close the rift. Your nature repels the warp but does not command it. But there is another way. Images flooded Superman's mind. Not psychic visions, his brain rejected those, but conceptual understanding transmitted at speeds approaching telepathy. He saw the solution, understood the cost, recognized the terrible efficiency of it. No, Superman said aloud. There has to be another way. Gilliman turned sharply. What did he show you? He wants me to... Superman struggled with the words. He wants me to fly into the rift. My presence repels warp energy. I've seen it, felt it. If I position myself at the rift's center, my very existence will destabilize it. The Chaos Gods won't be able to maintain the opening against something that fundamentally rejects their nature. Then do it, Guilliman said immediately. Close the rift. Save Terra. You don't understand. Superman's hands clenched. It's not instant. He estimates I'd need to maintain position for 17 hours while the rift collapses around me. 17 hours exposed to raw warp energy, to the direct attention of 4 Chaos Gods who want me dead, to demon attacks from all sides. He thinks I'll survive it because I've survived everything else. But survive doesn't mean unharmed. It means... He looked at the Emperor, at the 10,000-year-old suffering incarnate. It means becoming like him, changed, corrupted not by chaos, but by exposure to it. He believes the experience will either kill me or fundamentally alter what I am. The chamber fell silent, except for the throne's mechanical breathing, the eternal suffering sustaining humanity's lighthouse. Valorous broke the silence. The Emperor asks this of you knowing the cost. That is the nature of duty in this Imperium. We do what must be done, and we accept the price. I'm not from this Imperium, Superman replied. I don't owe Terra anything. I was pulled here against my will, caught in a war I didn't start, facing threats I never imagined existed. By every reasonable measure, I should find a way home and let you solve your own problems. Yes, Guilliman agreed quietly. You should. Any rational being would. So why are you still here? Superman looked at the hololithic display still showing Terra's orbital chaos, watched Imperial ships dying, their crews sacrificing themselves to buy seconds. Thought of young Kel in the Underhive, of Mother Arella preaching hope in forgotten places, of Canoness Verena who told him the Imperium consumes hope like bread. Because I've seen your people, he said finally. Seen what they endure, what they sacrifice, how they keep going despite everything this galaxy throws at them. Kel should be in school, not working reclamation lines. Those guard conscripts should have futures, not execution dates. Mother Arella should be teaching compassion, not hiding in shadows to do it. He turned to Guilliman. You told me I couldn't save this galaxy with kindness. Maybe you're right. But I can buy time. I can close that rift. I can show the people of Terra that someone chose to sacrifice themselves for them, instead of demanding they sacrifice themselves for others. You'll be changed, Guilliman warned. The Emperor doesn't offer this lightly. 17 hours exposed to the warp's attention will leave scars that never heal. You'll return different. Then I'll return different. Superman moved toward the chamber exit. But I'll return. And maybe, just maybe, seeing someone choose to sacrifice themselves for Terra instead of Terra sacrificing its people will inspire something new, something better. He paused at the doorway. That's what hope really means. Not certainty of success, but the willingness to try anyway. Go then, outsider. Show my Imperium what heroism once meant. Remind them that salvation need not always be purchased with suffering. The Emperor's words, or concepts, or whatever they were, carried something Superman hadn't expected. Gratitude. And underneath that, hope. Real hope. From a being who'd spent 10,000 years in agony maintaining an empire built on cruelty and necessity. Superman flew from the throne room at speed, cape billowing behind him as he rocketed toward the palace's upper reaches. Behind him, Guilliman watched with an expression that mixed respect, concern, and something that might have been envy. He makes it look simple, the Primarch said to Valorous. Choosing sacrifice, choosing hope, as if duty were easy. Perhaps that's why the Emperor asked him. Valoris replied. To remind us all that it should be. Above, Superman broke atmosphere again, accelerating toward the warp rift that gaped like a wound in reality. Demons sensed him coming and turned as one, hunger replacing confusion. The Chaos God's attention focused, 4 divine wills preparing to annihilate the anomaly that had killed their champion. Superman flew faster, 17 hours. He could do 17 hours. He'd done harder things, at least he hoped he had. Superman hit the warp rift's edge at supersonic speed and immediately understood why the Emperor had warned him. Reality didn't just break here. It rejected the concept of breaking. Physics became suggestions. Time flowed backward and forward simultaneously. Up and down were negotiable, and through it all, the raw stuff of the warp pressed against him like acid against skin. His Kryptonian biology reacted instinctively. Every cell in his body rejected the warp energy, creating a bubble of enforced reality around him. Where he flew, the rift hurt, not physically but conceptually. His very presence was anathema to chaos, a walking, flying negation of everything the warp represented. The Chaos Gods felt it immediately. In his brass citadel, Khorne roared with fury so intense that entire demon legions exploded from proximity. The Blood God's attention focused on the rift like a magnifying glass on an ant, except the ant was refusing to burn.
Zarathka failed. The War Princes fail. Then I shall crush him myself.
In crystalline labyrinths, Tzeentch calculated 9,000 possible futures and found all of them disrupted by Superman's presence. Plans within plans within plans collapsed because this being simply didn't care about fate or prophecy. Unacceptable. He rewrites possibilities by existing. Reality bends around him not because he commands it, but because he refuses to acknowledge alternatives. Such arrogance. Such potential. In the garden, Nurgle felt his plagues, his beautiful, life-giving plagues, simply stop when they approached Superman. Not die. Stop. Hibernate. Refuse to function because the biology they encountered made no sense to them. Curious child, rejecting my gifts. Perhaps he needs a more personal touch. A plague crafted specifically for him. Yes, that could work. In the Palace of Pleasure, Slaanesh studied Superman with artistic appreciation. Here was a being of such power who used it for others, such strength wasted on compassion, such beauty devoted to selflessness. The Dark Prince found it simultaneously fascinating and offensive. Let me show him what he could become, what pleasures he denies himself, what perfection he could achieve if he only embraced excess. The 4 gods attacked simultaneously. Bloodthirsters manifested by the hundreds, hurling themselves at Superman with axes that could cleave titans. He met them head-on, fists moving with precision Batman had taught him, speed the Flash had pushed him to perfect. Each punch shattered brass bodies. Each heat vision blast vaporized demon essence. They died by the dozens, but more replaced them instantly. Lords of Change attempted to reshape reality around him, making space infinite so he'd fall forever, making time freeze so he'd be trapped in eternal stasis. But Superman's biology simply rejected the changes. His cells existed in enforced normal space, creating a pocket of real physics wherever he flew. The sorceries broke against him like waves against bedrock. Great unclean ones vomited plagues specifically designed to harm him, diseases that attacked molecular bonds, infections that fed on solar energy, viruses that could corrupt Kryptonian cells. Superman felt them trying to take hold, felt his body fighting at the cellular level. His immune system, enhanced by yellow sun radiation, burned through them. But they kept coming, wave after wave of biological warfare. Keepers of secrets whispered temptations directly into his mind, showed him visions of Lois, of his parents, of a way home if he'd just stopped fighting, offered him godhood, worship, the chance to rule this galaxy instead of sacrificing for it. Superman heard them all and pushed them aside. He'd faced Poison Ivy's pheromones, Gorilla Grodd's mind control, Maxwell Lord's telepathy. Temptation was just another attack to endure. Hours passed. Superman maintained position at the rift's center, feeling it slowly, incrementally collapse around him. His presence was working. The Chaos Gods couldn't maintain the tear in reality against something that fundamentally denied their existence. But the cost was mounting. His costume was shredded. Burns covered his body, where warp energy had found purchase. His cape was gone, vaporized by demon fire. Blood leaked from wounds that should have healed but couldn't. The warp corruption preventing regeneration. His strength was fading, solar reserves depleting faster than Terra's distant sun could replenish them. On Terra, billions watched through pict screens and Vox broadcasts. In the Underhive, Kel watched Superman fight alone against hell itself. In the Imperial Palace, Gilliman monitored tactical displays showing the rift's slow collapse. In orbit, the Imperial fleet formed defensive spheres, ready to engage any demon that slipped past Superman's cordon. "He's been up there 11 hours, Admiral Koskinen reported. 6 more to go, but his combat efficiency is decreasing. He's slowing down. He's tired," Gilliman said simply. "Even Primarchs tire. Even heroes reach their limits." He opened a Vox channel. "All ships, prepare to engage if he falls. We don't abandon those who fight for us." But Superman wasn't falling. Not yet. He'd found something in the endless combat, in the grinding battle against impossible odds. He'd found rhythm, the same rhythm he'd felt watching the Custodes fight, the precision of the Grey Knight's rituals, the unwavering faith of the Sisters of Battle. This was what the Imperium did. This was their existence, distilled to pure essence. They fought when winning was impossible. They held when retreating made sense. They sacrificed when survival was the easier choice. And they did it every day, on 1,000 worlds, against 1,000,000 threats. Superman stopped seeing the demons as individual enemies, started seeing them as the test they represented. Each bloodthirster was a question. Will you trade mercy for efficiency? Each Lord of Change was a temptation. Will you accept corruption for power? Each great unclean one was an offer. Will you embrace stagnation for relief? Each keeper of secrets was a choice. Will you abandon duty for desire? His answers were consistent. No, 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 no. The Chaos Gods felt his resolve, and for the first time, experienced something approaching fear. This being wasn't just resistant to corruption. He was boring to corrupt. No hidden darkness to exploit. No secret shame to leverage. No buried trauma to weaponize. He was exactly what he appeared to be. Someone who chose to do good because it was good.
Impossible!
Khorne raged. All beings have darkness. He has no future I can manipulate, Tzeentch admitted. He creates his own fate by simply choosing. My plagues cannot take hold, Nurgle observed. He has no despair for them to feed upon. He has no excess to exploit, Slaanesh concluded. No hidden desires, no suppressed wants. He is Complete. The four gods reached a terrible conclusion simultaneously. They couldn't corrupt Superman, couldn't tempt him, couldn't break him through suffering. The only way to defeat him was to kill him through exhaustion, and he was proving frustratingly difficult to exhaust. Hour 13. Superman's movements were mechanical now, running on discipline rather than energy. His vision blurred. His heat vision flickered. His strength was a fraction of normal. Hour 14. He stopped dodging, started tanking hits. Let demon claws rake his flesh because moving took more energy than healing. His Kryptonian biology was burning through reserves he didn't know he had. Hour 15. He could barely maintain flight, hovered more than flew, but he held position. Held the center, held the line because that's what heroes did. Hour 16. Gilliman prepared deployment orders. Valorous gathered the custodies for emergency extraction. The Grey Knights began last resort banishment rituals. Everyone preparing for the moment Superman fell. Except Superman wasn't falling. His body was failing, but his will was unbroken. And in the warp, the Chaos Gods felt something they hadn't felt in eons. Respect. Grudging, hateful respect, but respect. Nonetheless. Hour 17 arrived. The rift collapsed. The moment the warp rift sealed, Superman fell. Not gracefully, not like a hero descending to victory. He fell like a stone, like dead weight. Atmospheric friction burning across his battered body as Terra's gravity reclaimed him. His eyes were open but unseeing, his arms limp. His consciousness flickering between awareness and oblivion. In orbit, the Imperial fleet watched their champion plummet. Admiral Koskinen's hands hovered over the deployment controls, calculating intercept trajectories, knowing they had seconds before impact would turn their savior into a crater. Gilliman was faster. The Primarch launched from a Thunderhawk at full burn, jump pack igniting, pushing his armor of fate to velocities it wasn't designed for. He intercepted Superman at 20,000 meters. Massive armored arms wrapping around the falling figure, jump pack screaming as it tried to arrest their combined momentum. They hit the palace courtyard hard enough to crack stone, Gilliman's armor absorbing most of the impact. The Primarch rolled, protecting Superman's body with his own, and came up on one knee with the battered Kryptonian cradled in his arms. "Medikey!" Gilliman's command voice cut through the gathering crowd. "Now!" But it was Valorous who reached them first, the Captain General kneeling beside them, his guardian spear set aside. "Let me see him." Superman looked terrible. His skin was gray, almost translucent, showing veins that pulsed with something darker than blood. Warp burn covered his chest and arms, corruption that his cells were fighting at microscopic levels but couldn't fully purge. His eyes, when they focused, showed swirling purple depths. Temporary, the Medici would later confirm, but disturbing nonetheless. 17 hours, Superman whispered, each word costing visible effort. "Did it close?" "You closed it," Gilliman confirmed, his voice gentle in a way few had ever heard from the Lord Commander. "The rift is sealed. The demon fleet is collapsing without reinforcement. Terra is safe." He paused. "Because of you. Not just me." Superman tried to sit up, failed, settled for turning his head to see the assembled crowd, custodies standing at attention, Grey Knights who'd fought alongside him through Vox coordination, Sisters of Battle who'd shielded Terra while he held the line above, Imperial Guardsmen who'd manned defense stations knowing they were the last line if he fell. "All of us, together!" A sound rose from the crowd, not cheers. The Imperium didn't do triumphant cheering. but something more profound. A collective exhalation, like humanity itself releasing breath it had held for 17 hours. And underneath that, whispered prayers of gratitude that echoed the same sentiment in 1,000 variations. The Emperor protects, and today he sent us a defender. In the underhive, Mother Arella collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Around her, workers who'd abandoned their shifts to watch the feed stood in stunned silence. Young Kel looked at the projection showing Superman being carried into the palace and felt something he'd never experienced before. The certainty that someone powerful had chosen to sacrifice for the weak instead of demanding sacrifice from them.
Will he be okay?
The boy asked. I don't know, Mother Arella admitted.
But he showed us something we'd forgotten, that heroes don't demand worship, they earn it through sacrifice.
Across Terra, across the Sol system, across the Imperium through astropathic relay, the story spread. The outsider who'd closed the warp rift. The alien who'd proven himself more human than most humans. The stranger who'd chosen Terra over escape, duty over survival, hope over certainty. The ecclesiarchy scrambled to control the narrative, but it was too late. The story was already becoming legend, and legends didn't follow official channels. It spread through soldiers' vox traffic, workers' gossip, underhive poetry. Some called him the 21st Primarch. Others called him the Emperor's answer. Still others simply called him Kal-El, the name he'd given freely when asked. Superman spent 3 days in the Palace Medici ward, surrounded by tech priests and biologists adepts who'd never seen physiology like his. They documented everything: his cellular structure, his solar absorption, his body's war against warp corruption. Not to weaponize, Gilliman had ordered, but to understand, to learn how something could reject chaos so completely. On the 4th day, Superman woke fully. The warp burns had faded, his cells finally winning their microscopic war. His strength was returning as Terra's sun fed his depleted reserves. He sat up in the Medici bed and found Gilliman waiting, reading reports on a data slate. Lord Commander, Superman greeted. Kal-El. Gilliman set the slate aside. How do you feel? Like I spent 17 hours being attacked by literal hell. Superman flexed his hands, testing restored strength. The Emperor was right. I'm changed. I can feel it. Nothing obvious, but I understand the warp now. Not how to use it. I still can't. My biology still rejects it. But how it thinks. How it hungers. What it wants. He looked at Gilliman. It wants you all dead or corrupted. It will never stop trying. We know, Gilliman said simply. We've known for 10,000 years. We endure anyway. You do more than endure. Superman stood, testing legs that felt almost normal. I watched your people while I fought. Watched ships position themselves between demons and Terra, knowing they'd die. Watch defense stations fire until their ammunition ran dry, then ram demon engines. Watch soldiers hold positions against impossible odds because someone had to hold them. He walked to the window overlooking Terra's hive spires. You told me I couldn't save this galaxy with kindness. Maybe not, but your people are already saving it with courage. They just need someone to remind them that courage isn't the same as cruelty. Gilliman joined him at the window. What will you do now? The Mechanicus believes they can engineer a path home. It would take decades, but they're confident they can recreate the dimensional rift that brought you here. Decades. Superman considered that. While I wait, what? Just watch the Imperium grind itself into dust? Or, Gilliman said carefully, you could help change it. The Emperor spoke to me after you fell. The first direct communication I've had from him in years. He said you reminded him of what humanity once aspired to be.
before the age of strife, before survival required monstrosity. The Primarch turned to face Superman directly. Help me reform the Imperium, not through conquest or force, but through example. Show the galaxy that there's another way to fight, that hope and competence aren't mutually exclusive. Superman was quiet for a long moment, thinking of Kal and Mother Arela, of Aloris's respect and Desian's professionalism, of billions who'd watched him choose sacrifice over escape. "I can't stay forever," he said finally. "My Earth needs me, my family, my friends, my responsibilities. Eventually I need to find a way home." "Eventually," Guilliman agreed. "But until then?" Superman smiled, the first genuine smile since arriving in this nightmare galaxy. "Until then, let's see if we can teach the Imperium to hope again. Really hope, not just pray and suffer. Hope backed by action. Hope earned through sacrifice. Hope that demands better instead of accepting suffering as inevitable." He extended his hand. Guilliman clasped it. Human and Primarch, alien and demigod, united in the absurd belief that maybe, just maybe, this galaxy of endless war could learn to be something more. "The Emperor protects," Guilliman said, the traditional benediction. Superman added his own, "and we protect each other." Outside, Terra's sun rose over Hive spires, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the light seemed a little brighter. The story of Superman's arrival in Warhammer 40K became legend before it became history. Across the Imperium, soldiers told the tale of the outsider who'd closed a warp rift with nothing but will and sacrifice. Workers whispered about the stranger who'd chosen to save Terra instead of finding his way home. Children in the underhives learned a new prayer, not to the Emperor's distant light, but to the hero who'd shown them that salvation could be earned, not just received. The Chaos Gods learned too, though their lesson was bitter. They'd forged Zarath-Ka specifically to kill hope, to prove that chaos was inevitable. Instead, they'd created the circumstances for hope to flourish, because nothing inspires belief like watching someone choose sacrifice over survival. Superman spent his years in the 41st millennium walking a careful line between hero and symbol, between helper and false idol. He fought alongside the Adeptus Astartes, learned from the Custodes, broke bread with Imperial guardsmen, and taught anyone who'd listen that competence and compassion weren't opposing forces. He couldn't fix the Imperium. It was too vast, too broken, too dependent on the very cruelty he opposed. But he could show them glimpses of what it might become if it dared to dream again. And when the Mechanicus finally opened a dimensional rift home, when Superman stood at the threshold between realities, he left behind something more valuable than victory. He left behind memory. The memory that once someone powerful chose to sacrifice for the weak. That once hope had walked among humanity wearing a cape and an alien symbol. That once, when the galaxy's darkness seemed absolute, a light from another reality had proven that even here, heroism was possible. Young Kal, grown into a man by the time Superman departed, would eventually become a leader in the Underhive Reformation movements. Mother Arela's teachings spread from shadows into sanctioned doctrine, and across 1,000 worlds, a new prayer emerged. Unofficial, but persistent. The Emperor protects, but we protect each other, and even the lost can find their way home. In the end, Superman didn't save the Imperium, but he reminded it that salvation was possible if they were willing to fight for it not with cruelty, but with courage. Not through suffering, but through sacrifice chosen freely. Not by accepting darkness, but by insisting on light.
even when the galaxy itself seemed determined to snuff it out. The Emperor, sitting on his golden throne in eternal agony, felt the outsider's departure and spoke one final message through the Astronomicon. "Go with my blessing, Kal-El of Krypton. You reminded my Imperium what it once dreamed of becoming. Perhaps with that memory, they might yet achieve it. And in another reality, on another Earth, Superman fell through a dimensional tear and landed hard on Metropolis soil. Lois was there, as she always was, catching him as he stumbled. She looked at his haunted eyes, his scarred hands, and asked the question she always asked. What happened? Superman looked at his hands, still feeling phantom warp burns, still hearing the prayers of billions. I found a galaxy that forgot how to hope, he said quietly. And I tried to teach them to remember. Did it work? He thought of Kel's determined face, of Gilliman's cautious optimism, of Terra's sunrise on that final morning. I don't know, but I think I gave them a chance. And sometimes, a chance is all anyone needs. Above them, the sun shone bright and uncorrupted. Superman looked up, let its light wash over him, and smiled. He was home, but he'd carry the Imperium with him forever, a reminder that even in the darkest galaxy imaginable, hope refused to die. It just needed someone brave enough to defend it. The Emperor protects. More stories await.